We now know, courtesy of Bob Woodward's recordings of Donald Trump, that Donald Trump lied, and as a result, people died. Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner. So we now have Donald Trump caught on audio tape. We now know that he lied to us. He lied to the American people. He lied to the world about the dangers posed by the coronavirus. What are the implications, the legal implications, the criminal implications of the fact that Donald Trump lied, and as a direct result, people died? People who didn't have to die. So I come at this question not from a place of politics, but from being a former career homicide prosecutor in Washington, D.C. I was a federal prosecutor for 30 years, but 22 of those years I spent handling murder cases, trying them, indicting them, supervising them. I handled murder cases in the local Superior Court for the District of Columbia. I handled murder-driven RICO cases in Federal District Court in Washington, D.C. So I come at this conversation as a former career homicide prosecutor. And that's why I want to talk about what the legal implications, what the criminal implications are now that we know Donald Trump intentionally lied about the nature of the virus and just how deadly it was, and he put us all in harm's way as a result. First, I want to quote at some length from the Washington Post reporting about the Woodward Tapes, which have now been released. Here is some of what the Washington Post reported about what Donald Trump said. He said, quote, "You just breathe the air, and that's how it's passed," Trump said in a February 7 call. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than even your strenuous flus. This is deadly stuff, the president repeated for emphasis. At that time, Trump was telling the nation that the virus was no worse than the seasonal flu, predicting it would soon disappear, and insisting that the U.S. government had it totally under control. It would be several weeks before he would publicly acknowledge that the virus was no ordinary flu and that it could be transmitted through the air. Trump admitted to Woodward on March 19th that he deliberately minimized the danger. Quote, "I wanted to always play it down," close quote, the president said. Quote, "I still like playing it down because I don't want to create a panic," close quote. Well, first of all, can I tell you that there is no such thing as the "I didn't want to create a panic" defense, such that he could lie about the danger the American people were facing? "I didn't want to create a panic" is not a defense to lying and putting us all in harm's way. You know, he knew it was deadly, but he lied to us and he downplayed it. He knew that it was transmissible by just breathing, by just inhaling near somebody who was infected, but he hid that fact from us. And he lied, and he said it was no worse than the seasonal flu. And while I'm at it, it sort of paints the whole PPE, personal protective equipment debacle, in a new light, doesn't it? Donald Trump knew it was airborne. You could catch it just by breathing. And yet, what did he do? He refused to order American manufacturers to produce personal protective equipment when we needed it the most, when our healthcare workers needed it and were suffering from dramatic shortages of PPE, when the American people needed it to keep us safe. He refused to use the Defense Production Act that was right there at his fingertips He could have ordered American manufacturers to produce all the PPE we needed to keep us safe, but he wouldn't do it. Instead, his State Department was arranging to have PPE sent to China, Mike Pompeo's State Department. So what we know is that President Trump lied, and as a result, people died when they didn't have to. Let's turn to the criminal offenses of manslaughter and murder. For months now, I have been saying, given my experience as a homicide prosecutor, Donald Trump was already guilty, if you will, committed the crime of manslaughter. Why was I saying that? Because manslaughter requires proof of three things. And Donald Trump did all three of those things. Those three things, what we call elements of the crime, are one, that Trump acted in a grossly negligent way, or he had a duty to act, and his failure to act was a product of gross negligence. He actually fulfills that element on both of those theories because he acted in a grossly negligent way and he failed to act in so many ways that were just as grossly negligent. Element number one. Element number two, his grossly negligent conduct, whether it was an action or a failure to act, was reasonably likely to inflict death or serious bodily injury on another. When you're lying about a deadly disease and putting people at risk because of your lies, then your lies, your gross negligence is clearly reasonably likely to inflict death or serious bodily injury on another, so he fulfills the second element. The third element is that he thereby caused the death of another. And that can sound tricky because, well, he didn't actually go out and kill anybody. But here's what's important. The law defines causation, causing the death of another, as follows, that your conduct, Trump's conduct, was a substantial factor in bringing about the death. Not that it literally caused the death, but that it was a substantial factor in bringing about the death. And let me use a quick hypothetical to highlight exactly why Donald Trump fulfills element 3 of the crime of manslaughter. We had a case in Washington, D.C., where a robber was chasing a victim. The robber chased the victim out into oncoming traffic, and a car struck the victim and killed him. We charged the defendant, the robber, with manslaughter. Why? Because his conduct was a substantial factor in bringing about the death of the victim by chasing him out into traffic, even though the car itself was the cause of death, the car striking him. Donald Trump has chased us all out into an oncoming deadly virus. His conduct is a substantial factor in bringing about the death of nearly 200,000 Americans and counting. That's why even before these admissions, even before these tapes were revealed by Woodward, Donald Trump had committed the crime of involuntary manslaughter. Now, different jurisdictions call that crime, which is a relatively low level of homicide liability, different things. Some call it involuntary manslaughter, some call it negligent homicide. Donald Trump committed that crime even before we knew he lied to us and he concealed from us the true threat posed by the coronavirus. But now that we know he lied, let's talk about the elements of murder 2, second-degree murder. Because Donald Trump may have just upped his own criminal ante by lying to the American people and putting us all in harm's way. There are only 2 elements of the crime of second-degree murder. One is that you cause the death of another. Trump caused the death of another. Causation carries the same definition in second-degree murder as in manslaughter, that Trump's conduct was a substantial factor in bringing about death. Clearly it was. And then the second element of second-degree murder can be fulfilled in three different ways. And it is either that Trump intended to kill people. We may not be able to prove he intended to kill people, though maybe we can. A grand jury investigation will get to the bottom of it beginning in January. He either intended to kill people, he intended to inflict serious bodily injury on people, and it resulted in death. Or number three, and this is where I think we should focus. The third way you can satisfy that second element of murder two is if your conduct demonstrated a conscious disregard of the extreme risk of death or serious bodily injury posed by your conduct. Bingo. Bingo. Donald Trump's lying to us, concealing the true nature, concealing just how dangerous it was, concealing the fact that it was airborne, and not doing what he needed to do to even generate the PPE that could have protected us, shows a conscious disregard of the extreme risk that his conduct posed, an extreme risk of death or serious bodily injury. On that theory of murder two liability, Donald Trump is guilty. The way I used to argue that to the jury, it's called the conscious disregard prong of murder two. I used to say, folks, the defendant knew what he was doing was just that dangerous. The defendant knew that his conduct posed an extreme risk of death or serious bodily injury to the victim, and he just didn't care. He consciously disregarded that extreme risk. That's what Donald Trump has done, ladies and gentlemen. Take it from a former career homicide prosecutor. How do we hold him accountable? Well, beginning on January 21st, we begin presenting evidence to the grand jury of these crimes and all of the other crimes Donald Trump and all of his co-conspirators, his enablers, his aiders and abettors, his accessories. We present all of the evidence to the grand jury, and we ask the grand jury as the conscience of the community if they believe that there's enough evidence to return indictments against Donald Trump for either manslaughter or murder two, many times over. And there are so many other crimes that will need to be investigated in the grand jury, committed by Donald Trump and so many others in his administration and in his orbit, in his family. And what we'll have to do, in all 50 states, quite frankly, anywhere where people were lost to the coronavirus as a result of Donald Trump's conduct, all of those cases will have to be presented to grand juries all around the country. And Donald Trump will have to be held accountable for the lies he told, for the damage that he's done to us, for the loss, for the suffering, for the death. Donald Trump will have to be held accountable because 120,000 dead Americans, like justice, matters. Please stay safe. Please stay safe, folks. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.